I'm Lauren Mitchell. I'm 35 now, and I never thought I'd be the kind of person who would walk away from her own family. But there I was, holding my phone in one hand, staring at a text from my mother that simply read, "Mortgage is due." No greeting. No explanation. Just another demand. And for the first time in my life, I didn't reply with a transfer. I replied with a sentence that would change everything. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and if you've ever had to draw the line with people who are supposed to love you, hit that like and subscribe button. I was raised in a modest, split-level house in Kentucky, the older of two girls. My parents, Karen and David, always said we were a family built on responsibility and hard work. They meant it too, at least when it came to me. By the time I was 10, I was packing lunches, folding laundry, and helping with my younger sister Megan's school projects like it was second nature. Megan was different. She had a softness about her, a quiet sort of charm that drew people in. Where I was measured and focused, she was impulsive and dreamy. My mother said I was her steady one. Megan was her free spirit. It sounded harmless when we were kids, but over time it shaped everything. My 16th birthday came and went without much fanfare. I got a scientific calculator and a prepaid college savings account starter kit. Megan's 16th. She got a weekend at a lakeside spa resort, a gold necklace, and the car I'd spent 2 summers saving up for wrapped in a bow. Lauren doesn't need those things, my mother would say. She's practical. Megan needs a little extra to feel special. That phrase, "Lauren doesn't need," followed me for years. When I made straight A's, it was barely mentioned. When Megan scraped by with a C average, there was cake and confetti. I started to realize that being dependable in our family meant being invisible. College was another turning point. I got in on a full ride, took a job shelving books at the campus library, and lived in a shoebox apartment off campus. When Megan enrolled 3 years later at the same university, she got everything handed to her tuition, paid monthly allowance, even a private dorm suite. When I asked about it, my mother smiled and said, "You're so good with money, honey. You always figure it out." After graduation, I moved to Chicago and landed a junior role at a mid-sized accounting firm. My apartment was small enough that I could reach the fridge from my bed, but it was mine. I built my life in pieces, piece by piece, without ever asking for anything. It was during those years I met Ryan at a friend's dinner party. He was a software engineer, calm, sharp, steady. He saw something in me that I had hidden for a long time. "You act like you're fine," he said once. "But I think you've been carrying too much for too long." He wasn't wrong. Even after moving 3 states away, I called my parents every week. I sent cards on holidays. I never missed Megan's birthday. I kept hoping that one day they'd finally see me, not just for what I could do, but for who I was. But it never came. Megan dropped out of grad school, bounced between jobs, and somehow always landed softly. My parents paid her rent. They covered her medical bills. They told me about her struggles with such tenderness, as if it were all just part of her journey. When I got promoted at work, I got a "That's nice, sweetheart" over speakerphone. Still, I told myself family was family. I kept giving time, energy, and eventually money. I figured it would balance out someday. That belief held me together until the day my grandfather passed. My grandfather, Paul, was the one person who truly saw me. He came to my high school graduation with a camera around his neck and tears in his eyes. When I visited, he'd ask about my career like it mattered. He gave me books on leadership with quiet underlines and scribbled notes in the margins. And in every one, a short message. "Proud of you, kid." When he got sick, I flew home often. I helped with his meds, drove him to appointments, sat with him while he dozed. Megan came by sometimes, but I was the one who stayed through the hard days. He'd squeeze my hand and say, "You're my rock, Lauren." So when I got the call that he had passed, I grieved, not just for him, but for what he represented. The funeral was quiet. I sat with my parents and Megan in the front pew. Old friends and distant relatives came up afterward, many of them telling me how much he had spoken of me, how proud he had been. I held on to those words like a lifeline. 3 days later, we sat in a law office waiting to hear the will. That's when everything changed. We met at the lawyer's office 3 days after the funeral. It was a small building with dark wood paneling, the kind that smelled faintly like old paper and lemon polish. The chairs were worn but comfortable, and the attorney, Mr. Franklin Bradley, had a way of speaking that made you lean in just to catch every word. I sat between my parents, Karen and David, with Megan across from me, flipping through her phone until the meeting started. There was no tension in her posture, no grief I could see on her face. My mother glanced over at me only once, then looked back down at the papers in her lap. Mr. Bradley gave a polite nod, then cleared his throat. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to extend my condolences. Your grandfather was not just a client, he was a friend, a good man." I nodded, hands folded tightly in my lap. The room was still, except for the quiet hum of a desk fan in the corner. He started with the usual formal language reading off the preamble of the will, the legal phrases that make these things feel so distant. Then he turned to the distribution. "To my daughter Karen and her husband David, I leave my house and its full contents valued at approximately $320,000. My mother nodded, expression neutral. "To my granddaughter Megan Franklin continued, I leave my investment portfolio currently valued at $175,000 and my collection of rare coins." Megan smiled, slid her phone into her purse, and reached for our mother's hand. There was a beat of silence. "To my granddaughter Lauren." I looked up. "I leave my collection of books, particularly those we discussed together, and my fishing gear, which brought us joy on our outings." And that was it. No accounts, no shares, no property, just books and a tackle box. Franklin kept reading distant relatives, small tokens, minor details, but I barely heard the rest. When he finished, I asked quietly, "That's all?" Franklin adjusted his glasses. "Yes, Lauren. That's the entirety of the bequest. But he told me he'd taken care of me in his will," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. He hesitated. "The will was updated about 8 months ago. The previous version had a different distribution. But I can assure you your grandfather was of sound mind when he made the changes. 8 months ago, I was working long weeks in Chicago. My parents, on the other hand, had been visiting him regularly. We left the office together, but I didn't join them for lunch afterward. I told them I had a work call. Instead, I drove out to the park where Grandpa and I used to fish when I was a kid. I sat on our old bench with the green-chipped paint and let the quiet settle around me. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there staring out at the water, letting the weight of it all press in. The books weren't the issue. It was what they symbolized. My phone rang. "Stephanie." "How did it go?" she asked. "They got everything I said. The house. The money, all of it. Mom, Dad, Megan, and you, his books, and fishing gear." There was a pause. "That doesn't sound like him. He adored you." I didn't answer. I didn't know what to believe anymore. That evening I drove to my parents' house. They were in the living room talking about investment options. Megan was sitting cross-legged on the couch, a laptop open on her knees. "I need to talk to you," I said, standing in the doorway. Karen looked up. "We thought you went back to Chicago." "Not yet. I want to know what happened with Grandpa's will." David shifted in his chair. "These things are complicated, Lauren. It changed 8 months ago." "What changed?" Megan rolled her eyes. "Why does it matter?" "It's done. It matters to me," I said. "He told me I was included, and then he wasn't even gone a week before I find out I was left nothing. You got something my mother said. The books, his fishing equipment, things that meant something to the two of you. Did you talk to him about changing it?" My parents exchanged a quick glance. We discussed family needs, my father said. He wanted to help Megan get on her feet. She's 29, I said. When does she start standing on her own? That's not fair, Karen snapped. We've always supported you. Really? When I was working 3 jobs through college while you paid Megan's way. When I covered your mortgage payments and medical bills and never once got paid back. Megan looked confused. What bills? I turned to her. You didn't know they've been coming to me for money for years. The room fell silent. It started the year I got promoted to staff accountant. I was finally getting ahead, or so I thought. Then came the call 3 months behind on the mortgage. The bank was threatening foreclosure. I wired the $800 that night. My down payment fund disappeared in an instant. When I asked about a repayment plan, my mother said, "We're family, Lauren. We don't do that with each other." But the requests didn't stop. Property taxes, furnace replacement, Megan's ER bill when she didn't have insurance. Always urgent, always framed as temporary. They said Megan's struggling. She's still figuring things out. She just needs a little time. I was only 3 years older, but to them, I was the built-in solution. Vacations were canceled. Savings never grew. Even the engagement ring Ryan and I picked out got swapped for something simpler. Not because he minded, but because I couldn't keep pretending I could afford both a future and a family that treated me like a credit card. Ryan said it more than once. They're taking advantage of you. I didn't want to believe it. But I started keeping track. Every dollar sent, every promise broken, every guilt trip followed by a wire transfer. Over 5 years, I gave over $42,000, not 1 cent repaid. Still, I called for holidays. I visited when I could. I let them tell their friends how proud they were of my career, while Megan posted photos from beach vacations I'd unknowingly paid for. And somehow I kept hoping they'd see what they were doing. That hope finally cracked when I found out about the will. By the time I walked out of their house that night, I knew. They hadn't just taken advantage of me financially. They'd erased me from the one relationship that had always felt safe. I sat in my car for a long time gripping the wheel, feeling the truth settle in. My family had used me, and I'd let them. What I didn't know yet was how much more they were willing to take and how far I'd have to go to stop them. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a black pen. I didn't plan to write anything at first. I just needed somewhere to put the numbers. By the time I stopped, there were 5 years' worth of dates, dollar amounts, and brief notes. August, mortgage shortfall December. Megan's ER bill, April, furnace replacement. At the bottom, I circled the total, $42,385. I stared at it for a long time. That night I showed it to Ryan. He studied the list quietly, then looked up at me. "You've been carrying all of this alone." I nodded. The next day at work, I opened my retirement account summary and couldn't stop thinking about what could have been there. A trip, a house, maybe a wedding. Instead, I had wire transfer receipts and text threads that always ended with, "We'll pay you back soon." The requests had become routine. If I didn't answer right away, my mother would call again and leave a message like, "We're trying not to worry your father. You know how fragile his blood pressure's been." Or she'd text something vague like, "Don't make us go into default." The urgency was always mine to absorb. When Megan's car broke down, they called me not because I was nearby, but because they knew I wouldn't say no. When she moved to a new apartment, I covered her security deposit. When she went to the emergency room without insurance, it was my credit card that covered the balance. After every phone call, I'd tell Ryan, "This is the last time." But the next time always came. Our plans kept shrinking. A trip we'd saved for canceled. The engagement ring we picked out together swapped for something smaller. I defended them. I said it was temporary. I said they were just in a rough patch. But the patch never ended. It started to wear on Ryan. One night after I'd spent nearly an hour walking my mother through a budgeting app over the phone, he sat across from me at the dinner table and asked quietly, "Do you think they'd do the same for you?" I didn't answer. He got up, poured himself a glass of water, and said, "I'm not trying to come between you and your family, but this isn't sustainable." A week later, I made my first appointment with a therapist. Her name was Dr. Jessica Winters, calm, matter-of-fact, and focused. I told her about the money. I told her about the holidays where I showed up with gifts and watched my parents beam over Megan's latest project, the art show that never happened, the digital startup that vanished by spring, the blog she updated once and never touched again. I told her about the time my mother called me selfish for saying I couldn't help with the property taxes because I was behind on my own. Dr. Winters listened without interrupting. In our third session, she said something that stuck. What you're describing isn't just imbalance, it's financial abuse. Your family sees your income as shared property, but their money, that stays theirs. The word abuse landed hard, but I couldn't deny it. After that, I started seeing patterns. I'd call to share good news, erase a project I was proud of, and within a few days, another request would come. Sometimes they even led with, "We're so proud of you, honey, and while we have you." They didn't just rely on me, they built their lifestyle around my silence. Then came the breaking point. It was a Sunday. I was at brunch with Ryan when my mother called. I stepped outside to answer. "Have you seen Megan's Instagram?" she asked. "The resort in Bali looks gorgeous." I hadn't. I was working weekends trying to land a major audit client. "She deserves a break," she added. After that job didn't pan out, the marketing job I asked. She said. It wasn't a good fit, so we thought the trip would help her reset. She's using a little of her inheritance money. I didn't say anything. The week before, they'd asked me for $200 to help Megan relaunch her job search. I walked back to the table, sat down, and told Ryan exactly what she said. He looked at me for a long time. "She's in Bali, and they want you to pay for her job hunt." Later that night, I looked up the Instagram post. Megan was sitting by an infinity pool with a cocktail in hand, laughing at something off camera. In the video, someone asked about money. She laughed and said, "Between Mom, Dad, and Lauren, the family ATMs got me covered." It echoed in my head for days. That's when I called Dr. Winters and said I'm ready to change things. I just don't know how. We worked through a plan. She helped me find the words, anticipate the guilt trips, prepare for the fallout. Then I met with a financial advisor, William Thompson. He laid out my income, expenses, savings, and what should have been. "You're in decent shape," he said. "But based on what you've been giving away, you should have double the savings. Maybe more." We set up goals, rebuild emergency savings, increase retirement contributions, and the hardest part, cut off all family financial support. "I don't think they'd open anything in my name," I said when William mentioned freezing my credit. He looked up from the paperwork. Sometimes when people lose access to something they're used to, they react in ways you don't expect. For 2 weeks, I drafted the message. Ryan helped. Dr. Winters reviewed it. The final version was short, clear, respectful. I told them I could no longer offer financial help, that I needed to prioritize my own future, that I hoped we could still have a relationship, but the money was off the table. Then I blocked their numbers for 48 hours. That night, Ryan took me out to dinner. We didn't talk much about the email, but when the check came and I reached for my card, my hands didn't shake. What I didn't know yet was how quiet that silence would be and how loud it would become once they realized I wasn't giving in. The silence lasted a week. I kept checking my phone, even though I'd blocked their numbers for those first 2 days. When I finally unblocked them, there were no messages waiting, no missed calls, just quiet. "They think you'll fold," Ryan said one night as we cleaned up after dinner. I nodded, drying the same plate twice. "They're waiting me out." The quiet didn't hold. The following morning, I got a short text from my mother, just checking in. Haven't heard from you in a while. No mention of the email, no acknowledgement of the boundary I'd spent weeks preparing to set. Just a casual tone as if nothing had happened. I replied politely a simple, "Hope you're doing well." Nothing more. That evening she tried again. "Your father and I were talking about that loan from last year. We're planning to start paying it back soon." There was no dollar amount, no date, just the suggestion that maybe if I reopened the door, something might come through it. I didn't answer. By the third day, the tone shifted. Voicemails started coming in one after another, some from my mom, some from my dad. Most started calm and ended somewhere else. "Lauren, it's your mom. I don't understand what's happening. This isn't like you. Your father's under a lot of stress. He's not sleeping. I just thought you should know." I never imagined my own daughter would turn her back on us. The last message came from my dad. "We need a family meeting." Sunday, 2:00. Our house. No room for discussion. Just a statement, like a summons. I showed Ryan the message and he frowned. "That sounds like a setup." "I know," I said. "You don't have to go." "I do." We spent the rest of the week preparing. Dr. Winters helped me rehearse responses. Ryan offered to come along, but I told him I needed to walk in alone. Sunday came. The sky was overcast, the wind sharp. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed more cars than usual. My aunt's sedan, my uncle's truck, my cousin Michael's old motorcycle. Inside the living room was rearranged chairs in a circle faces, already watching the door as I stepped in. My parents sat close together on the couch. Megan was next to them, her eyes red. She didn't look at me. "Lauren," my mother said, standing slowly, "we asked the family to come today because we're worried. This isn't the daughter we know." Aunt Kathy nodded from across the room. "Sweetheart, we're just trying to understand. This feels so unlike you." I stayed standing. "This isn't about concern," I said. "This is about trying to talk me out of the boundary I've set." "That's not fair," my dad said. "We've always been there for you." "Really?" I looked around. "Because from where I'm standing, I've been paying your mortgage, your property taxes, Megan's emergencies. I've been the one making sure everyone else stays afloat, and I'm the one sitting here being told I've changed." Uncle Ray leaned forward. "Is it true you're refusing to help with the mortgage now?" "Yes," I said simply. "You'd let your parents lose their home?" my aunt asked. "They received a 6-figure inheritance 3 months ago," I said. "What happened to that money?" There was a pause. My mother glanced at Megan. Megan looked down at her lap. "We had expenses," my dad said. "Like Megan's trip to Bali?" I asked. "Or the kitchen remodel I saw when I walked in?" No one answered. I turned to Megan. "Do you remember what you said in that video? You called me the family ATM." My mother drew in a sharp breath. She would never... I have the video. The room was still. My dad sat forward. "That's enough. We're your family. Either you help us, or..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. "Or I'm not part of the family anymore," I said quietly. I looked straight at him. "Is that what happened with Grandpa's will? You talked him into rewriting it because Megan needed it more." My mom stood. That was different. He wanted to make sure Megan had a foundation. And I didn't. "You've always managed," she said. "You've always been fine." That was the moment, the core of it. Because I had figured things out, because I'd worked through college and climbed the ladder and never asked for help, they'd decided I didn't deserve it. I looked around the room. My aunt and uncle, my cousin, my parents, Megan. I took a breath. "I'm not going to keep explaining myself," I said. "I won't be sending money anymore. That decision is final." I turned toward the door. "Lauren, wait!" My mother called. I stopped at the threshold. "The mortgage is due tomorrow," she said, voice shaking. "We don't have anywhere else to turn." I turned back to face her. "You already cut me out of your inheritance," I said. "Consider this my inheritance to myself." And then I walked out. The wind had picked up. My jacket wasn't warm enough, but my hands were steady as I reached for the keys. I sat in the driver's seat and waited for the shaking to come. But it didn't. Not yet. The calls started before I made it home. By the time I pulled into my garage, my phone had gone off 11 times. Voicemails, texts, a missed video call from Megan. The silence of the past week had cracked open, and now everything was pouring out. The first voicemail was from my mother. Her voice was tight on the edge of breaking. "Lauren, how could you say something so cruel? After everything we've done for you, please don't let things end like this. We need you. We're going to lose the house." The next one was from my father. "Your behavior today was inexcusable. When you're ready to apologize, we can talk." Then Megan's text arrived. "You really did it. Mom hasn't stopped crying. Dad says his blood pressure's through the roof. If they lose the house that's on you, hope you can live with it." She sent 3 more after that. The last one read, "No one in the family is on your side. They all know what you did." I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in my lap, staring at the wall. Ryan walked in, set a mug of tea on the nightstand, and sat beside me without asking any questions. Later that evening, I activated every step Dr. Winters and I had prepared in advance. I blocked every family number again just for a while. I set up an email filter to keep their messages in a separate folder. I logged off the social media accounts where Megan was most active and tightened the privacy settings on the rest. Ryan ordered dinner and didn't ask if I was hungry. He just placed the bag on the counter and unpacked it like we always did. My best friend Stephanie called that night too, just to tell me she was proud of me. It helped more than I expected. The first wave of silence came back the next morning. It was different this time, not the waiting kind, but the kind that follows noise. I checked the filtered email folder, once saw my aunt's name in the subject line, and closed it without opening it. 3 days later, Megan tried again. She called late on a Tuesday night, a night she knew Ryan was at his friend's game night. Her voice was soft, almost familiar. "Hey, I need to talk to you. What's going on? I'm in a bit of a situation. My credit cards are maxed out. I've got some bills coming due. Rent's short. I was hoping you could help. Just this once." "I can't do that, Megan." She didn't answer right away. Then, I thought that was just about Mom and Dad. "Not me. It's about all of it." I was clear in the email. "This is different. It's an emergency." "What kind of emergency?" She paused. "There's this online course I signed up for digital marketing. It could really help me get a stable job. I just need to finish it, but I have to pay rent and I can't do both." "That's not an emergency," I said. "That's a decision." Her tone changed. "If I can't make rent, I'll have to move back in with Mom and Dad. They can't afford that right now. You know what that means." The message underneath was clear. If I didn't help her, I'd end up helping them anyway. "I'm sorry," I said. "That's a choice you'll have to make." She hung up without another word. The next morning, Megan posted something vague on social media, a quote about how some family only shows up when they want to control you. A few relatives commented, offering sympathy and asking what had happened. She replied to one with a long paragraph painting herself as abandoned. My name wasn't mentioned, but the message was unmistakable. I didn't respond. I sent a screenshot to Dr. Winters instead. She wrote back an hour later. "This is a textbook tactic. She's trying to recruit sympathy since the direct appeal didn't work. Keep your boundary. You're doing what you need to do." That weekend, another text came from my mother. "Mortgage is due. We're short $2 and $100. Can you transfer today? We'll pay back next month." No apology. No mention of our last conversation. Just the same assumption they'd always made that I'd come through. I had rehearsed the reply with Dr. Winters. "I'm sorry to hear you're struggling. As I stated in my email, I'm no longer in a position to provide financial assistance. I sent it. Then I turned off my phone, walked into the kitchen, and started prepping for the client pitch I had on Monday. When I turned my phone back on later that evening, the messages had multiplied. From my mom, "Please, we could lose the house. Your father isn't well. This stress is hurting him. I never thought my own daughter would turn her back like this." From my dad, "You're being unreasonable. You've always been so black and white. Real life doesn't work that way." From Megan, "Congratulations. You broke Mom. Hope it was worth it." I didn't reply to any of them. I made tea. I pulled out the binder for Monday's presentation. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to drop everything and fix someone else's mess. That night, Ryan wrapped his arms around me while we watched a movie. Halfway through, I realized I wasn't bracing for the next request. I wasn't waiting for the phone to ring. There was still noise coming from their side, but it wasn't getting through the same way anymore. What I didn't know then was that things weren't done escalating. They still had one more move to make, and they weren't planning to do it quietly. The emails started showing up in the filtered folder the following week. Long ones, short ones. Some were polite, most were not. My Aunt Kathy wrote first. "Your mother is beside herself. None of us understand why you're doing this. Family helps family. That's how we were raised." I didn't open the rest. I moved them to a folder labeled "For Later." Dr. Winters had suggested that a way to acknowledge but not engage. Ryan brought home takeout that night and didn't ask about the messages. We sat on the couch watching a show we both liked, and I let myself breathe. A few days later, something unexpected happened. My phone buzzed mid-morning with a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. An hour later, the same number called again. I stepped outside the office and answered. "Lauren, it's your Aunt Kathy. Please don't hang up. I'm here." "I owe you an apology," she said. I didn't understand what was happening. "Not really. I didn't say anything, just waited. After you left that day, your mom was upset. She said some things that changed how I see the whole situation." I leaned against the side of the building. The wind had picked up and I could hear her voice through the rustle. "I just wanted you to know," she said, "I support your decision. I may not have before, but I do now." After we hung up, I sat in the stairwell for a long time. I wasn't used to that kind of call, not from family. I wasn't sure what to do with it. Later that night, I told Ryan what she'd said. He nodded, didn't say much, just pulled me close. The next day, another surprise. A message from my cousin Michael, who hadn't said a word since the meeting at my parents' house. "Hey, just wanted to say I get it. They did the same thing to me a couple years back when I got my bonus. Never saw a dollar of it again. Stay strong. Small things." But they chipped away at the story I'd been told that I was alone, that I was the villain, that no one else had ever been in this position. Dr. Winters had called it the illusion of isolation, that belief that your experience is unique when in truth it's more common than people admit. The weeks passed. I kept my routine. I worked. I cooked dinner with Ryan. I went to therapy. Sometimes I cried in the shower when the weight of it all snuck up. Other times I felt something close to relief. It was a strange kind of grief, not for people I'd lost, but for the version of them I'd wanted to believe in. "They're still alive," I said once during a session, "but it feels like they're gone." "You're grieving the relationship you hoped for," Dr. Winters said. "That version of family you held on to for years, that's real grief." One afternoon, Ryan and I were walking back from the grocery store when I checked my phone and saw a message from my aunt. They took out a loan. High interest. It'll keep them in the house for now, but it won't solve anything long term. A few days later, I heard that Megan had moved back in with them. Her inheritance was gone, and without someone else footing the bill, she'd had to give up her apartment. It was the first time in years she'd had to stand on her own, or at least try. The hardest part wasn't the silence. It was knowing they still didn't see it. To them, I was the daughter who turned away, the one who walked out instead of stepping up. They didn't remember the check I wrote when their furnace broke, or the rent I covered for Megan when she quit her job in the middle of winter, or the time I canceled my vacation so they wouldn't fall behind on the property taxes. But I remembered, and this time I wasn't going to forget. Each week that passed without a request felt like a small victory. I kept contributing to my retirement fund. I opened a new savings account. I adjusted my budget. I planned. Ryan noticed. "You're calmer," he said one night as we folded laundry. "You sleep deeper. You laugh more." I hadn't realized. But he was right. 6 months after that final family meeting, I received a letter in the mail. Not a text, not a voicemail, a handwritten letter. From my father. The handwriting was his slanted, neat, careful. "Lauren, I've been thinking a lot. I don't agree with how you handled things, but I'm starting to understand why you felt the need to. Your mother and I are making changes. It's not easy at our age, but we're trying. I hope someday we can rebuild something between us. Different this time, maybe better." There wasn't an apology, but there was something else, recognition maybe. The first crack in a wall that had been there for years. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. I didn't respond. Not yet. As for Megan, I hadn't heard from her since that last late-night call. But I saw her name pop up once on social media, a small post about her new job at a marketing firm. No vacation pictures, no long captions, just 4 months strong today. Feels good to earn it. It was late spring when I closed on my condo. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, quiet neighborhood, nothing flashy, just solid and bright. The kind of space I used to daydream about when I was living paycheck to paycheck and fielding last-minute calls about overdue bills that weren't mine. That morning, I stood by the window with a cup of coffee and let the sunlight warm my face. The realtor had left a small welcome basket on the counter. Ryan was unpacking a box in the living room, humming something under his breath. "I still can't believe this is yours," he said. "It's ours," I corrected gently. We didn't need to say what it meant. The home, the peace, the silence that wasn't waiting to be broken by crisis. Work had been steady. After the promotion to senior manager at the firm, my financial footing had finally caught up to the years I'd spent giving. William, my financial advisor, had helped me set up automated savings, a solid investment plan, and a retirement timeline that didn't depend on luck. The life I was building felt real, in a way it never had before. 4 months after I received my father's letter, I asked them to meet. Neutral territory, a quiet coffee shop downtown not far from my office. I told Ryan I'd feel better if he came too, not at the table just nearby. He sat with a newspaper at the corner booth while I waited. My parents arrived together. My mother looked tired, smaller somehow. My father's posture was more hesitant than I remembered. "You look well," she said. "I'm doing well," I answered. We ordered coffee, chit-chatted about the weather, road construction, the price of groceries. No one mentioned money. That was part of the agreement. Eventually, my dad said, "We sold the house." I nodded. It was too much. We downsized to a townhouse near the train station. Smaller, but manageable. My mother added, "I've taken a part-time job. Admin work a few days a week. The hours are good. It's enough." I didn't ask for details. I didn't offer help. But I listened. We set boundaries during that first meeting. Calls would be scheduled. No unannounced drop-ins, no financial discussions unless they were about their own progress. If those lines were crossed, I'd step back again. They agreed. I think they understood I meant it. Megan didn't come that day, but a few weeks later she sent a message. "Got my first raise today. Did it without anyone's help, just one sentence, but it said more than anything she'd offered in years. We exchanged a few texts after that, nothing deep, just small steps. I wasn't rushing it, neither was she. My relationships with extended family shifted too. Aunt Kathy and I began speaking regularly, nothing heavy, just consistent. Sunday phone calls, swapping recipes, swapping news. Cousin Michael and I started meeting once a month for dinner. Turns out he liked the same small Thai place I did. It's wild, he said one night, picking at a plate of noodles, how different things look once you stop trying to make sense of them. He'd been through his own version of it years ago. Loans never repaid. Promises made and forgotten. No confrontation, just quiet distance. Until now, we hadn't realized how similar our stories were. Back at home, I unpacked the last of Grandpa Paul's books. He'd left me his library and fishing gear, nothing else. At first, it had felt like a consolation prize. Now it felt like something else entirely. I dusted each book before setting it on the shelf titles we used to talk about passages he'd underlined. Some pages still held his old notes in the margins. On one just inside the cover, he'd written, "You're going to do something meaningful, Lauren, I can tell." The fishing rods hung neatly on the wall of the second bedroom, now my office. Sometimes when I sat at the desk paying bills or reviewing client files, I'd glance at them and feel steadier. That Sunday, Ryan leaned against the kitchen counter with his usual cup of tea. "What do you think about inviting Stephanie and David over for dinner this weekend?" he asked. "Celebrate the new place properly." I smiled. That sounds perfect. I opened the fridge and made a mental note of what we needed: fresh herbs, maybe a bottle of red, something light, something easy. Later that night, Ryan and I sat on the back porch talking through the future. The air was soft. The neighbors' wind chimes ticked gently in the breeze. "I've been thinking about starting my own practice," I told him. He looked up from his drink. "Yeah, not a big firm. Just something small, focused on women, financial independence, debt, recovery, long-term planning. A place where they could get help. Real help. You'd be amazing at that. I want to build something that matters." Ryan nodded. "Feels like the right time." It did. For the first time in years, I wasn't patching holes in someone else's life. I was building something of my own. We spent that summer building new rhythms. Sunday mornings on the porch, quiet walks after dinner, long talks that drifted past midnight, not because we were trying to fix anything, but because we finally didn't have to. The quiet had changed. It wasn't about distance anymore. It was about peace. The condo filled slowly, not just with furniture or photos, but with things that felt like mine. A blue vase from a weekend market, a small framed recipe card in my grandmother's handwriting, Grandpa's books on the shelves behind my desk, his fishing rod still hanging on the wall, not as symbols of what I didn't get, but reminders of what I'd come through. I saw my parents again in late fall. We met for lunch at a small diner halfway between us. My father ordered the meatloaf. My mother asked about my work. They didn't ask for anything. They didn't bring up the past. And I didn't bring it up either. It wasn't perfect, but it was steady. The townhouse suited them. The job seemed to suit her. They were managing not effortlessly, but honestly. And that mattered more than I thought it would. Megan and I stayed in touch carefully. No long conversations, no heavy exchanges. But on my birthday, she sent a card with a handwritten note. "Hope this year brings you everything you've earned, and maybe a little extra." That felt like something. One night in early December, Ryan and I sat on the living room floor, talking through business ideas. I'd started drafting plans for the practice, something that blended accounting with education, helping women untangle their finances after years of giving more than they got. He asked me if I was nervous. Some, I said, but I've already done the hard part. The real work wasn't in starting over. It was in choosing to stop shrinking, to fit inside someone else's expectations. That winter, I looked back through my old journals, quiet entries scribbled between client calls and late-night budgeting spreadsheets, notes to myself, questions I couldn't ask out loud. Will they ever see me? Am I asking for too much? What happens if I just stop? Now I had the answers. They didn't see me the way I wanted them to, and maybe they never would. But I had learned to see myself, and that was enough. Setting a boundary doesn't end a relationship. It changes it. And sometimes that change is what saves it, even if it has to look different than you imagined. I think we all inherit something one way or another. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's silence, sometimes it's the strength to stop a cycle that was never meant to continue. That was my inheritance, not the one I expected, but the one I needed. If you're listening to this and carrying the weight of keeping everyone else afloat, I hope you know this. You are not selfish for choosing peace. You are not wrong for wanting a future that includes you in it, and you are never too far gone to start again. Thank you for walking this road with me. If this story brought something up in you, if it reminded you of your own family or helped you feel a little less alone, I'd love for you to share it. Leave a comment or just take a moment to breathe. You deserve that. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this one, you're welcome to stay a while. We're all just figuring it out together.